for any one of your friends who love the game and they play the game, if they want a one-to-one, a little bit of advice from me, I'll make myself available. So if somebody wants to call me and have a conversation with me, I'm putting it out there. They don't have to do it.
You must follow the top channels for that service.
Yeah.
Welcome, Dad. My dad is here with us today. We're starting it off with some family, Mr. Dinos Iordanou. God, okay. My dad has quite the story. Dad, I'm going to let you kind of walk through a little bit of your story, but just to give people some background. Native of Cyprus, small country in the Mediterranean, now an American, but came to the US on a good old boat. Nothing in his pocket but $200, and I would say has been very successful since, especially in the insurance and finance space, working for a ton of companies, and now even on a new venture to kind of open up a new reinsurer in the space. So Dad, talk a little bit about, you've been a soccer lover since you were, I would say, born, but talk a little bit about kind of where you thought your life was going to go prior to coming to America from a career standpoint, and then kind of how that early transgression happened, getting on a boat, coming at 19 and having to kind of make something out of nothing.
Well, let me start from the beginning. We were a family of 5 boys and a girl, and a great duo of parents. So a big thing in the family was education from day one. We had to do very well in school. My father used to tell us, my job is to feed you, clothe you, and put a roof over your head. And your job is to go and get a great education. So don't come home with a report card that you're not proud of. So that was the basis, of my upbringing, my family life. At the same time, both my mother and my father, they were generous to the community. Even though we were not a rich family, we were a poor family. My father was a policeman and my mother was a homemaid. But my father used to tell us, when you go to sleep every night, the first thing you do is you pray to God, you thank him for everything that he has given to you. And then you ask yourself 2 questions. Question number 1 is, what did you learn today? And you better learn something every single day. And that's my advice to all young people and old people. We can never stop learning. And question number 2 was, what have you done to make another human being feel better? What have you contribute to society? And I think that's an obligation we all have. So I grew up with that kind of a background, loving family, strict. My father was a cop, ran the house like it was a police academy. And, we all did well. Now, coming to America, education was the basis of the foundation. And because we were poor and we had no other means to get an education, my father says, you're going to go to America. You're going to work. You're going to earn the tuition. You're going to get into a college and you're going to graduate. And many years after I've done that, I was 19. I graduated high school when I was 17. I went to the military. Service is mandatory in Cyprus. So I served my time. And then at 19, I came to the United States with $200 in my pocket and big dreams and a hope. And but I was prepared. Many years later, I asked my father, I said, how did you trust to send your firstborn son, 19 years old, 3,000+ miles away, barely speaking the language, weren't you scared to do that? And he says, absolutely not. I knew that you were prepared for every eventuality. You had a good work ethic. We did emphasize education. You had a purpose and a passion. And for that reason, I knew that you're going to be successful. And that was the beginning of the journey. 17 days on the Queen Anna Maria, because my father couldn't afford to fly me here. The ticket was too expensive. By boat, it was cheaper. So that's how I came. And I was welcomed by an uncle I had in Astoria. I stayed with him for a few months until I found my way around. Then I rented a room, and I started a job. I was a gas station attendant, and later on I became a taxi driver, and later on I became a short order cook. So I've done a lot of the jobs that young people do when they're trying to go through college and then they're living. And
Yeah.
the thing that still resonates in my head, it was after 17 days, I had no communication with my family at all. And then I called my parents to say, I arrived, my uncle has received me, I'm well. And my father's first two questions: did you get a job yet? And did you enroll in school? So he knew that I wasn't going to get a job in the first day, and he knew I wasn't going to be in school. But he was trying to make a point. You have a purpose. The purpose is to get an education. And in order to get an education, you need funding. The funding is going to come from your work, because I can't send you money. We have no money to send you. So his questioning, in a loving way, he was putting what it was important in front of me, so I don't lose focus what the purpose of my trip was to the United States.
Yeah. Well, fun little facts about that. Great background. But my dad is by far the best breakfast chef of all time. So there's some things that have come out of it that are good. And one little short story that I think, and I want you to tell us, the next question I have for you is, when did you fall in love with soccer, and how is that kind of led throughout your life? For me, obviously, you've been my greatest supporter. I'm so happy we could share in that for so many years. But fun fact, because I played in Long Island, we used to go to a lot of games outside of the state. So I remember my dad was very adamant about driving through the city, which is not my preferred route to get out of Long Island, but he was a taxi driver, so he would go that way. And I remember we pulled over one time, and it was going to either a game or a tournament. Pulled into a gas station. I was half awake, and I'm sitting in the passenger seat. This guy knocks on my window, and he goes, do you know, in 1980, whatever, your dad used to pump gas at this station? And it gave me so much perspective, because I think as kids nowadays, these opportunities that we have in sport, we sometimes take for granted. And I want you to talk a little bit about, like, you are someone that loves soccer. Joanna, he may challenge you in terms of passion for the game and love for the game. And so talk a little bit about also just like facing the reality, not to, let people know, but my dad was a very good player. He played professionally. He played semi-professionally. Talk about a little bit about coming to America and recognizing that soccer or football could no longer be a primary thing for you because your priorities shifted, where like kids like us, right, we have the opportunity to pursue it without the pressure of having to earn money and go to school on without scholarship and whatnot. So when did that kind of kick in?
Well, in Cyprus, the most popular sport is soccer, because every kid can play. And we used to play it in the backyards, and actually I remember playing soccer barefooted when I was 5 years old. We didn't have boots, we couldn't afford boots, and we actually play barefooted. We enjoy the game. And the game is a great game for two reasons. First of all, you don't have to be rich to play it. You need a pair of shorts, a shirt, not even boots. You can play barefooted, and a ball, and all of a sudden, with a bunch of friends, you can have a lot of fun. And that's what's happening in Cyprus, and that's what's happening in Brazil and Argentina and all the other good places that a lot of great players come from. So the love of the game starts in your youth, and I had that love. I didn't start playing organized with coaching until I went to high school. So the first organized training that I got, it was when I went to high school, and as a freshman, I made, the soccer team, and I started playing, in the soccer team. In my junior year, a semi-pro, actually it's a professional team, Othello's Athenian, plays in the second division in Cyprus. They recruited me to join the team. And my father wouldn't let me go and play because at that time I was working on the weekends on the racetrack, and we used to get £2.
Yeah, did you know this?
I had no idea he worked at a racetrack. Okay.
Right. We were in those days, they didn't have these electronic tickets. So people, they come to the windows and they make the bets, and you pull the tickets. And so I was working there with your uncle Takis, and we were getting £2, a week, which you got to understand. That my dad, your grandfather, was in the police force, and I think his entire salary for the month, it was like maybe 90 or 100 pounds. So £2 a week,
Wow.
for us, it was all our pocket money and all that. So he tells his club, which is not very rich, he says, if you want my son, you better pay him, more than what he's making at the racetrack, So I got my first contract. It was kind of an amateur contract, but it stipulated that I will be getting, £2, independent if we win, lose, or tie, and prim above it, another £2 if we won, and £1 if we tie. So that was my introduction, because my father says, hey, you need the money. You need the money, but also I understand you love the sport, and since you're a good player and they want you, they better, pay you, And I'm talking 1967, 1968, 1969. That's the years that I played for Othello's at the end. And then I came onto the States. I played for NYU, New York University. I was in the varsity team. We got all the way down to the Sweet 8. We didn't make the Final Four. We lost to Hartwick College, which is a soccer school up in upstate New York. But I enjoy the game. And then when we organized the Pan-Cyprian Association in 1975, I joined their team, and I played for them until 1982. And it was a semi-pro team playing in the Eastern League at that time. It's the Cosmopolitan League, which is today is the American Soccer League, which is a second division with the professional, soccer. And then I continued playing until I was in my mid-50s in over the 30 league, over 40 league, and over 50 league.
Joe will appreciate until his knees literally fell out.
Until my knees gave up on me, and then I said,
then he stopped. That'll be Joanna. I'll be ripping her off a field at 55.
But it was more your mother. Your mother said, "Enough of this. I'm sick and tired of you with ice every night."
You couldn't walk for like 3 days after, but it was worth it.
All for the love of the game.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, Joanna knows that better than anyone. So now we want to get into kind of the meat. And so this, Dad, but part of why me and Joanna started this podcast is because not only are we trying to serve people that are passionate about the game and support the NWSL, but we also want to be an avenue to support players themselves. And I will say to anybody, since I was a little girl till now, you've always very, very much ingrained in our head the value of $1. even at the height of your career and early on in your career. And so you've always had this mentality to think about money in a way where how can I take $1 and make it $2? How can I take something and bet on myself or invest in something? And obviously you've been very successful to make a bunch of money and do it in different ways, especially through the, stock market. But what would be, your advice to, like, as an example, right? Some of these girls are making $30,000, $40,000 a year, which I recognize is well below. I mean, I'm not even sure that quantifies as minimum wage. Obviously, there's not always times in your life where you can have large amounts of discretionary money, but what is your advice in terms of somebody who's saying, okay, my food is covered, my living is covered, it's not a lot of money, but I want to at least set something aside so that in 10 years I can say, okay, maybe I made 10 or 15,000 more than I could have just sitting in the bank account. What's your advice to somebody who maybe doesn't have a lot of money, but doesn't have a lot of expenses? So they're trying to really, save, but also save properly and intelligently so that they can make more on just whatever's sitting in their bank account currently.
Yeah. My advice is as follows. Rule number one is whatever you make, you only spend 90%. The other 10% you put aside. And it becomes an addict.
So I'm going to stop you. Hold up real fast. Let me pull out a pen and paper. Rule number one.
Right. Whatever you make, 10% goes to savings. Because the way you're going to accumulate wealth, especially if you're a young person, if you have to understand how money compounds. Are you guys familiar with the rule of 72? Tell us. Let me explain.
I'm writing it down.
If you get
rule of 72.
If you invest money and you get 7% return, which is been the average over the last 100 years of the stock market. If over the years, some years are down, some years are up, but the stock market has compounded with about 8% over the last 100 years. So for young people, which, you're going to live another 70 years, in new generation today, when you read statistics, and I'm in the insurance business, so I understand the actuarial science, the probability through the medical breakthroughs that we have for people your age to be over 100 is 50%. 50% of the population that they're under 20 years old today, they're probably going to live to be 100.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and don't forget, we have people dying in accidents, in wars, etc., and it includes all that into. So the people that they're healthy, and with the medical advances we have, so you have a long runway. Now, the rule of 72, money doubles every 10 years if you only earn 7% on that money. So let's do the math. Somebody saves $5,000. They make 50 and 5,000 and they invest it in the S&P 500, the spiders. 10 probabilities. 10 years from today, the 5 is 10. 20 years from today, the 10 is 20. 30 years from today, the 20 is 40. And 40 years from today, the 40 is 80. Okay. So you started with 5 and you're 80 over 4 years. Now, if you do that every year in the first 10 years, you have 10 times that. So the 80 becomes close to $800,000. It's the rule of compounding. But if you don't have the discipline, to save, that mentality that a portion you have to put on the side, you're not going to achieve that. Let me give you an example. When I started a company called Arch, and we hired these young lady in our London office. She was in her 50s, and she wasn't saving at all. And we had this conversation, and I said, Jane, I think it's good to go to the pubs on Friday and have a few beers and all that. And, but you're violating rule number 1, which is you have to save for retirement. So she went home, talked to her husband, and says, I got this boss. I think he's a pretty smart guy, and he told me we got to be saving 10%. So she started doing it on the 2nd year. In her retirement party, 15 years later, she says to me, I'm a secretary. She was an executive assistant, not the highest paid people in the world, but I follow your rule. And now I told my husband that in my bank account, I have 600,000 pounds because you have me maxed on my 401k. And, I would have drunk all that money in the pubs if it was for you. But you did embarrass me, when I asked the question in a town hall meeting, and you said, those who don't save, they're not gonna really control their retirement. And, so that is, the rule number 1. Rule number 2, a lot of people, they're gonna try to give you advice about where to invest the money and how to invest the money, etc. At the end of the day, for a young person, the best way to do it is to get index funds. Vanguard, they're very low cost because you don't want to be spending money to advisors, and you actually playing the market, and you don't want to time the market. Nobody can time the market, but you got to be consistent in your discipline. Discipline in soccer makes you a great player. Discipline in finances makes you for a financial future that you're going to like. So you continue to put money into it. And my advice is to get the Spiders. Spiders is the S&P 500, or you get a lot of other index funds that.
Can you just because people are not going to know, Doug, can you,
especially Joe, what's an index?
It's you know what the S&P 500 is, the top 500 companies. Yes. And there is a fund that basically you can buy, and it goes up or down with how the S&P 500 goes. Then there is the Russell 2000. It's the same thing. And then within those, there is certain categories. If you want to play technology, if you want to put your money into consumer staples, if you want to put your money into financials like banks and insurance companies. So if you want to be more precise, you do that. I will do a basket of that as your wealth starting to grow. You do a basket because they want their time. If the soccer players is on the field, playing, training, and they don't have a lot of time to do research, etc. So you leave it to the professionals. So you go to Vanguard, you go to Fidelity, you go to which they're very, very low cost, and you choose the funds. And basically, once you choose the funds, you're going to put your money. There is 2-3 criteria that you look for. One criteria is, what is the track record of the fund over the last 10 years, 15 years? Is the team that is going to be investing your money still the same team that track record has been achieved? Because if it's a new team, you might have to do more research. They might not give you the same, outcome, And if you're good at it, maybe your returns are going to be even better than the market, the 7 or 8%. I'll give you an example. When I joined Verisk in 2001, I was allowed to buy $100,000 worth of very rich stock at that time. And I did, because I believe in the company. I was going to be on the board. We're going to help them grow, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I just looked at that $10,000 21 years later, and today is worth over $10 million. Okay, that is extraordinary, because Veris compounded about 18% a year for 21 years, and I was part of it, right? So when you do your compounding, if you earn 7%, is 10 years to double your money. If you earn 10%, is 7 years to double your money. If you earn 20 or 30%, it becomes so fast, you don't know as to how quickly you compound. And, you know, one formula you all need to know is the compounding formula. So if you want to see the power of compounding, you get your calculator.
Yes.
And there is, and you say 1.10 XY to the 10 for 10 years, and it will give you the outcome. You say 1.20.
Let me write that down. 1 point.
Well, whatever interest rate you, whatever return you think you're going to have on a stock. If it's 5%, it's 1.05.
Okay.
X to the Y, and the Y factor is the years. So there is a button on your calculator. It says XY, X to the Y power.
Got it.
Right? And you do that. So if you do
Wow.
18, you see in 20 years, you see the compounding is incredible.
Yeah.
I love
Wow.
that.
He's really giving all the goods today.
I love it.
I also just, before you jump in, Joe, I just also want to make a point, because people are not going to be, this is like the lesson I was told at like 12, 16, 21. You know, we going through it.
Well,
Vanguard,
I keep repeating it because if you repeat it, eventually sticks, right?
yeah, true.
Yeah.
So
And
just so people,
let me offer this. I'm an old guy. I'll be 72 in March, but for any one of you friends who love the game and they play the game, if they want a one-to-one, a little bit of advice from me, I'll make myself available. So if somebody wants to call me and have a conversation with me, I'm putting it out there. They don't have to
you
do
must
it.
follow the top channels for that service.
Yes.
Just kidding. Okay, Joe, sorry, I didn't mean to jump in, but
Okay.
Vanguard is a website that you can look these up, is what I was going to say.
Yeah. Okay. So one, I can just sit and listen to you talk about your story all day long. It makes me smile, because it truly is the straight up American dream. So you were short order chef, you were a taxi driver, you were everything. How in the world did you still manage to budget when you did not really have anything in your pocket and were still going to school? So how did you even start to budget?
Well, my budgeting actually started the year after graduation, because up to that point, I had no funding.
Right.
So I was violating rule number 1, but I knew that I had to pay tuition, I had to pay rent, I had to eat, and made me. But once I got my first job at AIG, I double up on it. I was saving maybe 15% of my earnings from the first year I started working. And believe me, later on, actually, I started saving 20 and 30 and 40%, because as my income starting to go up significantly, I did not change my lifestyle, because a lot of people change their lifestyle, and all of a sudden I'm making more money. So in essence, I can spend a lot. I follow the advice of my father, and he says, any excess cash you have, you invest. And that's I had a professor who didn't make a lot of money, right? And when he passed away, it was the biggest gift they gave to Polytechnic University. And I think it was in excess of $100 million. He left it in his will. And he got there because even as a professor making, a reasonable salary, he was a big saver and a good investor. And he became a multi-millionaire, a decimillionaire, 100 million or more on a professor's salary. It didn't make it because he was making a lot of money as a professor, but he made it because he was a saver and a good investor.
Wow.
You know what's interesting is like I'm so accustomed to you, Dad, in terms of like the long game. But I feel like what's happening nowadays, it's like very, millennial, trendy, this, people that are day trading and getting into Bitcoin, all these things. Not that there's not ways to, I mean, again, if you're doing that as a profession and you're skilled in that, there's a difference. But I think that the problem you have, and Joanna, just to give you clarity, is like, as an example, right? When you're in the stock market and things like catastrophic happen, like take COVID, you know how many, like on paper, what people lost weeks after COVID was upwards of sometimes like 10, 20, 30% of their net worth because stocks just tanked.
I was down 40%.
Right. But what's crazy is like, I think what happens is people freak out and they start to pull their stocks right away because they say, oh my God, I can't bleed anymore. But my dad has always taught us, if you're in the long game, we're talking 10, 20, 30 years. It's like, it's more about riding those waves. Like things are going to happen, like pandemics, these things. I mean, COVID's the worst ever, but we've had other things that have happened globally that have affected the stock market, and the housing market was a huge one as well. It's just interesting to see that because I think so just so you're aware, Dad, what we've heard from a lot of girls is like, people always assume the investment game is for millionaires. And I think that's the most misconstrued thing. You may not, just because you're not a millionaire doesn't mean that you can't invest and make money. 5,000 and converting that to 10,000 is still you're doubling your money at the end of the day.
Right.
And so many of these girls, they just sit it in a Wells Fargo account.
Yep.
And they come back in 10 years and it's the same 22,000 that they've had for 10 years. And they never build on that wealth. And I just thought that was an interesting thing because I feel like now you gotta have the confidence to ride kind of the waves of the market, like the
you got to play the long game. You said it very well. The long game is you have to have a long horizon, and you got to have the discipline and the nerve. If you're going to be in the stock market,
So I'm curious if you have thoughts on this. We're coming up on our 10th year in the NWSL. We've seen gradual growth. I think it's in a much better place than we used to be. Do you have any, as a businessman, do you have any thoughts on how you think the league can kind of keep properly progressing, but also being, I think the greatest fear for everybody is, making sure that we're also financially responsible, because we've had a couple times now where the league's gone bankrupt and then we have to start back at zero. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, I have two thoughts. I think the league is doing very well because the product is good. There is a lot of, young players coming through, the college ranks with a lot of talent. So the league is not suffering from putting a good product. Then the rest of it is marketing and getting eyeballs to look, the product. And I think the league has a bright future from my perspective, because it's a game that is being played by a lot of girls and a lot of boys. As I said, is the cheapest from an equipment point of view game to adopt, and everybody can play. If you 5-footer or 5'5" or 5'10", it makes no difference. You're gonna find your position in the field to be effective. Best player ever played a game, Pele, was 5'6", 5'7" at best. So it wasn't this powerful tool. It wasn't look at Messi, 5'9", 5'10", they list him. I think he's 5'8".
He's definitely shorter than that.
Oh, no, I understand. But then you got Ronaldo, which is a specimen of an athlete, tall. He can play the tall game. He's good on the air. He's good. Yeah. But what I'm saying is the game is for everybody, and not many games is for everybody. Soccer game is for everybody. Everybody can play. There are certain positions that physical attributes are required. If you're a center back, you got to be tall. If you're a goalkeeper, you got to be tall and agile, etc. But if you're a midfielder, sometimes the little penny guys are the best, But
it's so true.
So I know you're an Arsenal fan. So I know
Yes.
I'm going to get off on an Arsenal tangent here. What do you think of Arteta? Do you like it? Do you like the job he's done? Do you like the directions he's taking it? Do you like him sitting Aubameyang? What are your thoughts?
Yes, I do. In everything you do, and I applied it in all the companies. Don't forget, when I started Arch Capital, it was 12 of us with capital. We raised $1 billion to build a company, and today the company is 17 billion, and it has 4,500 employees. That's only 20 years later, right? So the foundation of that performance, it wasn't Dinos Iordanou. I'm one guy. It's the team, and more importantly, the culture and the environment. So if teams win games, teams win in the marketplace, teams build companies, not individuals. I think if you're having too much individualism in a team, it destroys the spirit. So I'm a big proponent of what Arteta is doing, because first of all, age doesn't mean anything to him. If you can show you can do it, you're on the team. Second, he wants a team atmosphere. He wants players the best attribute that I can give to Pele, because I was a kid and I watched him as a kid as I was growing. It was in my playing years in the 60s. He made everybody around him a better. Player.
Mm-hmm.
So the best players in the team is not what they do themselves, but how do we elevate the game of everybody else who is playing together. And I'll give you a phenomenal story. Years back, the two best basketball teams, in rankings and in wins and losses, there were St. John's and Georgetown. And Villanova actually won the national championship. In those years, both St. John's and Georgetown had stars. Patrick Ewing, Wennington on the other side, Chris Mullen, Walter Berry, and Villanova had some good athletes, but nobody that he was going to go number 1, 2, 3, or 4, or 5 in the draft. Where these guys, they would have had several people getting into, And Villanova, St. John's lost to Georgetown on the semifinal. The 3 teams from the Big East made the Final Four. And now Villanova, he was going to play Georgetown in the final. And nobody predicted that they're going to win the game. Well, they won and they got the national championship. You guys can research it. But they were interviewing Rolly Massimino, which is the coach of Villanova. And I think it was an ESPN reporter, and he says, Rolly, I've been watching you on the bench, and you didn't pay any attention on the scoreboard. You were always looking at the field, looking at your players, giving directions. You weren't looking at the scoreboard. He says, can you explain why? And he says, yeah, it's very simple, he says. I wanted my players to make the right decisions. When do they make their teammates better? Shall I take the shot or pass it? Because, another teammate can take a better shot than me. And when you have that attitude in a team, that the team plays together, the results are going to be good. And I knew, he says, we were doing the right things on the field. So I knew the scoreboard is going to be with us. So, at the end of the day, and it's the same in business. I was very successful because not only I was picking good athletes, good insurance executives, but also people that they wanted to work as a team. Because in the business of insurance, the manufactured product is a decision. All we make is underwriting decisions, claims decisions, actuarial decisions. So the quality of the decision is what differentiates an excellent company from a good company from a lousy company. So what is the probability of making better decisions when 2 minds, 3 minds, they're discussing, the situation, they're making a joint decision, versus a lone ranger that says, oh, I know it all and I'm going to do it. So it's the same when you're playing the sport. And I think, going back to your Arsenal question, I think Arteta has brought that flavor into the team. They're more of a team. They're talking to each other. They celebrate together. They try to make each other a better player. And if you're youthful and you don't have the experience, but you show things in practice, you're going to get your opportunity to be on the starting lineup or the first or second or third substitution and get a playing time. So I like him, and I think Arsenal is on the right track.
I love it.
Well, that was a great little, he always has good tidbits. Well, this has been incredible. And, Dad, you're definitely my role model. I love you. I'm very, people probably are now jealous. I have a very good mentor in my life. And, I think it's what you exemplify beyond just your American dream story. And I think it's important to note is, like, we talk a lot about the transition out of soccer and the importance of that. And everything you just spoke to were also lessons that you learned in the game. And I think what's incredible too is, like, looking at Joanna as an example. She's going to be serving in a role for many years where she's ingraining and teaching those lessons to young women. And they can then take that on to not a professional soccer career necessarily, but in the business world, in whatever they decide to pursue next. And it still applies, right? That team mentality still applies. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on, Dad. Love you. And this was great.